I try to be really intentional with creating experiences for guys to step into for work-life rhythm, to allow things like this to happen. Because I think a lot of times as guys, we're really good at putting our head down and working really, really hard. But we're not quite as good as cultivating a community and cultivating tribe and like-minded men.
All right. Hey, what's up, guys? This is episode 59 of the Man of Mastery podcast. Before we get into it today with guest Kyle Depiesse, I want to let you know about a couple things going on. I had hinted at the change in cadence to generally every other week to allow some space for some other strategic projects. One of those that's starting to come to bear is looking like a live, although virtual at this point, event that I'm going to be piloting with a team of mine. And if all goes well and it's the type of experience I think it can be, then it will be something we'll make available a little more broadly as well. Although, again, in the short term, probably Zoom or virtual based, where we all participate remotely and interact live via something like a Zoom. But also that makes it pretty accessible for a number of people. So that could be quite cool. If you're interested in that and just staying in the loop on what's upcoming in that sense, as well as heads up on the weekly podcast, you can join the mailing list, email list. Just jump over to the main website, manofmastery.com, and sign up for that email list today. All right, today's guest, Kyle Depiesse of the Reaching Beyond Experience. We have a lot of similarities, although his domain focus is a little different. It springboards off of financial freedom and sovereignty. We both have this theme of doing hard things to achieve degrees of freedom in life, of rejecting the herd mentality and being a bit contrarian in thinking and habit and action. And he also organizes groups of guys sort of doing epic things, a community, accountability. And we talk about transparency on Kyle's setbacks and lessons from those that really discovered the mission that he's on today. All right, so I think you're really going to enjoy guest Kyle Depiesse of the Reaching Beyond Experience. Let's check it out. All right, today it's my pleasure to welcome Kyle Depiesse. Take my best shot at that.
You nailed it. Yep.
Nice. Well, welcome, Kyle. I'm really excited to talk to you today. Kyle is a husband, a father, a former or recovering corporate burnout. Quite an athlete, I think, back to the collegiate days, and some triathlete experience.
Yeah.
A lot of athletes in my audience, so that's interesting stuff to talk about too. You've got a podcast of your own. I love your mission statement. My mission is to help high-performing men step into a work-life rhythm, brilliant, that allows them to sustain high performance and enjoy a fulfilling life without sacrificing their personal life.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
So welcome, Kyle. Really excited to talk to you today.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on, Michael. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it.
Really looking forward to hearing about what you're doing today, but let's back up to burnout, how that happened and what set you on the Kyle 2.0 path that you're on.
Yeah. Okay. So love to share. So I'm from southeast Wisconsin, a really small town. We refer to it as towns to give you an idea of how big the city is. And I went to school at UW Green Bay, finance major, and I took a job right out of college. I actually had back surgery 3 days after I graduated college. And so I spent most of my summer laid up. That was from the volleyball days of college. But anyway, I got a job there in Milwaukee, and I was in travel wholesale. Traveled a ton, and a 22-year-old traveling, it was quite a lot of fun. And I left the Milwaukee area, went to Minneapolis in 2005 for Target headquarters, Target HQ up here in Minneapolis. Currently in the Minneapolis area with my wife, Lois. We've been married for 7 years, and we've got a 3-year-old Cal. But anyway, so I moved up here in 2005, and I was at Target. And the Target culture, and there's nothing against Target, but it's very much the unspoken word is that every 2 years or so, you should be moving up the corporate ladder. You should be getting the next job. So that bug, that seed, was planted really early in my professional career, my mid-low 20s. And I was at Target for about 5 years. I went over to Carlson Residor Hotel Group, which is also in the Minneapolis area. So they own Radisson and Country Inn Suites. And I did that job for about 3 years. Again, traveled a lot, met my now wife at that time. And I was traveling so much that we decided I would rather be home. The husband that I want to be, I'd like to be with my wife and not gone all the time. It's just a personal conviction for myself. And I left Carlson to go to a video game distributor. So nothing at all related to any of the work. And I don't even play video games. So that's why it's kind of funny to hear that. But here I am slinging video games. And in 2015, I have this seed that was planted years back at Target that every couple years you should have a new job, a new title. And so how I defined success in my early professional career was based around money, titles, corner office, bonus, compensation benefit, all those things, right? The car that I would be driving, the house that I was living in, all the toys that I thought I was supposed to have. And it all comes catching up with me. And I have the title, I have all the things. And Michael, I can't tell you how absolutely empty that felt. In my entire career, I'm trying to get these things. I get these things and I look around and I'm like, this isn't that great. Something is missing. And so now here I am. I'm completely burned out because I'm working, 60, 70 hours to reach this point. At this time, I'm married. I don't have a kid yet, but it's sunset fatigue. You come home from work and you see your wife or your partner, your spouse, if you have kids, and you're like, my cup is empty. I've got nothing to give. And oftentimes that hurts those that are closest to us the most. And that's what was happening in my life. And I look around and I'm like, this is what I thought I was supposed to be doing. I'm chasing success. I get it. And then I don't know what to do. I'm burned out. I'm hating my job. I am in probably the worst shape of my life. My relationships are bad. I mean, you can see when you're burned out, the ripple effect touches basically every category. And so here I am stuck and I'm burned out. I'm at the bottom of my burnout. And I left corporate America in 2015. And I started to redesign my life around fulfillment. That was my target now, not success. And I define fulfillment really as using my gifts, my talents, and my story to make an impact on as many people as I possibly can. So I'm starting to figure this out. It's not an overnight thing. It's not a flip of the switch. But I left corporate America, and in Minnesota, you need to go back to get a license to teach high school, any sort of high school or any school to be a teacher at all. So I left and I started. It just kind of shows you how things line up when you start to follow the right things. My first day of the adult learning program to get my license, that very first day I found out about a job to start teaching. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I know business. I don't know how to teach. So the very next day I called them and they offered me the job on the spot to teach. And I'm like, you guys know that I'm not a teacher yet. I mean, I know the material, I know business, but I'm not a teacher. And they're like, yeah, we know we need someone. And you look, you seem like you looked the part. So I did it. And I started teaching and I loved it. I love to uncover the process of learning for other people. And that's a theme that has stayed with me now because I no longer teach. I came home in 2017 when our son was born shortly thereafter, and I became a stay-at-home dad. I graduated. I got promoted to being a stay-at-home dad for that season of life.
That's amazing.
And I love it. I enjoyed it. And that kind of led me to where I am now, which, as you mentioned, I'm a podcaster. I create experiences for people to step into rhythm. I don't really believe in work-life balance. I believe in work-life rhythm. And that's kind of what brought me to where I am today. And now I chase fulfillment. I don't chase the self-centered success.
No, that's amazing. It's tough to figure out for ourselves. And then you think about trying to share that with other, call it a peer group of guys. I find it even tougher as a father to think about how to teach some of these things, which we probably heard as well. There's a difference between hearing it and learning it.
Yeah.
And you're almost swimming upstream and trying to teach that against everything else that's out there in social media and a consumerism society. And, everything else we're told brings you success or definition of success and fulfillment, but it's a 180.
Yeah. Well, Michael, on my pod, one of the first few questions I ask in my quick hitters is, how do you define success? And it's interesting to hear people's answer, and it's interesting how that's evolved for people over time, because most people, the answer that I generally get is just having a positive impact on people. I said, okay, if you would have answered that 10, 15, 20 years ago, what would you have said? And they're like, well, completely different, money, all these things. So I think that there's a maturing process that happens, and we realize like, hey, yeah, making money is good, all that stuff is good, but we start to contemplate like, how am I leaving this world? How am I going to leave this world a better place? And I think that's what people are really start to get interested. And that's what turns over like a 2.0 career, or a second half, or a second act, or call it whatever you like. It all means the same thing, I think.
Right. Yeah. Not to go too far down this tangent, but it does seem that there's talking about balance points. There's probably some balance point there on, how do we get a more broad mindset around living lives of fulfillment, and maybe that's life of service,
Yeah.
but maintain a strong work ethic in
Yeah.
doing that, right? You start to hear these complaints about generational culture and philosophy. One
Yeah.
generation has a stronger work ethic than another. So if you get the right focus, how do you maintain the right energy, or the same energy behind the right focus?
Yeah, and I think it comes down to, really kind of the author's name, Simon Sinek. It's kind of really defining your why. And I think when you have got so much passion and energy around what it is you're doing, I mean, that work ethic just really kind of shines, because it does, it's cliche to say, but it doesn't really feel like you're working, right? It just feels like you're moving something forward that you're really passionate about. So the work ethic is always kind of there then. I mean, we see these books like the 4 Hour Work Week, and we're like, man, I'm working 60 hours. Where is this 4 hour work week? You know what I mean? So I think we see those things, and they're good intent. There's good intentions behind it, but I think we maybe just don't understand what's behind that, I guess.
Right. Yeah. And for a lot of people, when we talk about 2.0, it literally is a level of success and wealth, and the freedom to quote
Yeah.
unquote retire, maybe from the primary career, and now switch gears and think about what those decades or years of your life look like. And for people that have reached that point, especially relatively early in life, there's probably not a lot of desire just to idle, right? People are motivated. They want to
Right.
be intellectually stimulated. They want to be challenged and learn in other ways. So there really is a challenge there to figure out what's next, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
A little scary, maybe.
Yeah. It totally is. And, it's to go to the story that I have then. So when I'm burned out, a couple years back, what what every day I thought, Michael, I'm like, okay, today's the day I'm going in, and I'm just gonna resign. I'm just gonna hand in my letter of resignation, because like I hated at the sales meetings every month. The owner of the company would say, okay, if you guys don't get your numbers this month, next month I'm bringing Subway applications in for you. I was like, whoa. I mean, so you can imagine, like, that's the kind of culture that was there, and that was the toxicity that was there. It was fear driven. And so every day I'm like, I just want to quit. I was telling my wife, like, Lois, I want to quit. I don't want. We couldn't, right? Because we were living to the standard of two incomes, and every time we make more money, so what our lifestyle was lifestyle creep. And so we had said, okay, in order for this 2.0 to happen, it's going to take time, because right now we're kind of in bondage to our two incomes. We need to unwind some of that. And so then kind of enters the part of our story where we start to pay off debt. And as we start to pay off debt, we're like, you know what? What if we just paid our house off? What if we just got 100% debt free? Imagine what we could do. And sure enough, we did. We paid off in a little bit under 400,000 in about 38 months to be 100% debt free. So I think people have got to hear that, because when you start to look to redesign a 2.0 or a second half, it doesn't happen overnight. The vision can happen overnight, and you can lay down some tracks, but it's going to take some time for it to happen. And I think a lot of times we just get really discouraged because it doesn't happen as quickly as we want it to. But that's kind of the whole part of the reason why we went down the path of 100% debt free, because that would allow us to both go through a 2.0 if we choose. So I've done it, and my wife will hopefully in a couple of years do the same.
Follow suit. Okay. Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that. I'm intrigued because So I love books. Got a bookshelf here behind me. There's a couple
Hmm.
Simon Sinek books up there.
Yeah.
Another book up there is by a coach and a guy that's been a bit of a guidepost for me, another podcaster, Ryan Mickler, and it's his book Sovereignty, right? So it sort of is about finding freedom in your
Mm.
life, freedom from that bondage. In this case, it's debt sovereignty, right? And again, it goes contrary to pretty much everything that we hear. You go talk to your accountant and he's going to say, well, even if you want to pay off the mortgage, cash is king. So maybe you don't
Yeah.
pay it off, but maybe you just, throw the money in a savings account. You talk to your financial or your wealth advisor and they're going to say, look, your mortgage is 3.5%. You're going to average 7 or 8% in the market, and I'm an econ guy, you're a finance guy. It
Hmm.
just makes sense. But none of that accounts for the sleep at night factor. None of that
Yeah.
accounts for being free to follow your purpose, your passions, your sort of dreams in life, right?
Yeah. It's really hard to verbally communicate the feeling of not having debt. I mean, so you're a racer, right? You like to do a lot of outdoor races. So I like to tell people, go out for a run and do it with a weighted vest and carry two 40-pound dumbbells, put weights around your ankles, and go out and run and just see how it goes. And then I'd say, okay, now imagine doing the same thing. Take all that off and imagine how much lighter that is. And people really start to grasp the concept because I think we're so used to living with debt. Like you've always heard people say, well, we're always going to have a mortgage. You're always going to have a car payment, this, that, all the things that you had just said from your accountant, your financial advisor. I've heard all of them too. So I totally get it. But I think sometimes we get caught up because we don't live in a math bubble. We live in the real world. And if we're convicted by something like the freedom, and you get to define what freedom looks like for you, and every person gets to do that. For us, it was no debt. So, I mean, you've got to take my story all the way back to the Great Recession. And so about 12 years ago, right, 2008-ish, 2009, I am going through that part of time in just a complete opposite headspace. I get into that time, I'm working at Target. I ended up cashing out all of my 401k to buy gold. And not that it's terribly wrong to buy gold and to have gold, but I took out all of my 401k, paid all the taxes, paid all the pennies, unplugged all of that stuff, and I bought gold. It's like I bought high and I sold low, which is the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do. But I'm not paying attention to wisdom. I'm paying attention to doomsdayers that are building up propaganda so that you buy gold. So I did it. I fell for all of it, and the price of gold tanked, and so did all of my financial dreams. And it really, it didn't sink in. And here's a hack for people because I don't think as human beings we change until we're forced to change. And you have to have that moment where you say, you know what, man, I am sick and tired of this. And that happened for me. So I logged on to the Social Security website, which is just ssa.gov. I don't know if you've ever done this, or if the listener, when you're listening, if you've never done this, please do this. You log in, you obviously provide your Social Security number because that's what it is. And they generate your projected earnings in Social Security, which is also really discouraging. But you do that. And what people don't know is that you get to see your lifetime earnings. And you may be shocked by the number that you see because it's over a long period of time. The average household income in America is about 70 grand. So you do that for 15 years and you're going to eclipse $1 million. And then you're going to look around and you're going to say, where did it all go? And that's exactly what I said. And Michael, I was angry. I was mad. I was frustrated. I was confused. I was scared. And that's when I said, you know what? We've got to do something different because how I've been leading my family, because I led the finances, has sucked, has gotten us to a terrible spot. And so I have to do something different. And that's when I really started to pour myself into figuring out personal finances. So I would Dave Ramsey books, podcasts, all these things. I actually studied for the Series 7 and 66, which are the financial advising licenses. I passed. I don't practice it, but I was so interested in this because I said, I'm never going to do this again. I'm never going to let this money come through our hands and slip out. We're gonna do a better job managing it. I'm gonna take control with my wife and do it together. So that's kind of I think people have to have that moment in order for there to be a change.
Yeah, I think it's Tony Robbins that calls it inspiration or desperation, and
Yeah.
and it's hardly anybody who makes major change out of inspiration. Well, so maybe two things. So I think we're primarily talking about the roof over your head, your own house,
Yep.
and maybe depreciable assets like autos.
Hmm.
So one question: do you see any role for debt? So, for example, maybe in an investment, a rental property, and then two, I mean, let's just talk a little bit about the mindset and the mechanics that you use to crush your mortgage in 3 years, basically.
So the first one, is there good debt, or essentially, right? The good debt,
Right,
bad debt.
right.
Um, you know, I think I think personally that comes down to personal conviction and how you feel. Like, I don't think that, you know, if you have a mortgage on an income producing asset is necessarily a terrible thing. Always my caution is that that works when that works. But what happens when that doesn't work? Like, what happens when COVID hits and people aren't paying their mortgage? I mean, if you're relying on you paying mortgage on an income producing asset solely by your renters paying, you have to be prepared for that. And so, not that I'm against it, but for me personally, I would just be really careful in doing it. If your plan is really relying on other people, be careful. If your plan relies on you being in a lot of the control, I think I'm okay with that.
Fair enough, right? COVID's a huge sea change. Commercial
Yeah.
real estate ownership has
Yeah.
been bomb-proof for a long time, and now all of a sudden, out here in California, talking about some state-level mandate to
Yeah.
essentially cut rent. It's like, well,
Yeah.
that's all the equation of the investment.
I think, and you mentioned this a little bit early, it's basically contrarian thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And when you study the financial markets, they talk about something called odd lot theory, which, if you've not heard of that, basically buying shares of stock, you're supposed to buy in 100 shares, which is a lot. Lot as an LOT. So basically, what odd lot is, anyone who's an average investor like you and me, we probably can't afford to buy 100 shares of Google or something like that. It would cost us a ton of money. So we buy in odd lots or increments of 100. So what odd lot says is, once odd lotters start to buy a bunch of Google, you should sell it, because that's saying that the average investor doesn't really know, or maybe they're behind. So I think a lot of contrarian thinking when I look at investment opportunities as well. So to kind of go back to your question, when I see a lot of people buying investment property solely on debt, like putting 1% down, I get pretty nervous about that. So I kind of take a look at the bigger picture as well. And I think of contrarian thinking, and I think Warren Buffett said, you can tell who's been skinny dipping when the tide goes out. So I'd like to think about stuff like that, because it's pretty, I mean, it's kind of true. A lot of that stuff is true. So I don't know where I think I went off on a tangent,
No,
but
it's good. Buffett's got some great idioms. So
yeah,
then, all right, fine. So your mindset shifts, and you're gonna eliminate debt. So, and I know you coach around this, and I don't want to give away all the secret sauce, but how does that work mechanically? How do you go attack something that big that quickly?
here's a great mindset tip, because so many people get caught up in tell me the how, tell me the how. Well, the truth is, the how doesn't matter as much as your why does, because you could do, Dave Ramsey's got debt snowball, which is list all of your debts smallest to lowest and then just start paying them off. There's debt avalanche, which is list your debts in order of highest interest, pay that one off first. I mean, I think at the end, they will likely be very close to which one is quote unquote correct. The plan that works is the plan that works, which is to say, just be consistent. So many, because I think people really use, oh, let's debate the how, which I really think is just an excuse for not starting. You can pick a plan, and as long as you're consistent with the plan, you work the plan, and the plan will work. So I think that's one of the bigger hacks is you really have to sit down and say, why do I want to do this? What are we doing it for? The how doesn't matter quite as much.
I think that makes sense to me. The conviction and the vision that I could revisit
Yeah.
when something pops up and I'm going to go spend this on that
Yeah.
shiny object as opposed to staying on target.
Yeah,
Uh,
and you'll be like, well, my buddies want to go to Vail, for a long week and do a bunch of outdoor stuff, and it's going to cost X, and you're like, okay, well, how committed to paying off debt am I?
right.
So I those things will always come up, and if you're really anchored by your conviction, you'll stick with it. But if it's pretty loose anchor, you're gonna sway from it.
So on the mindset of that, I think one of the things you talk about is a scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset. How does that come into play?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of times I hear like I can't afford it. I can't do this. It's not in the budget. Well, I think the correct way to approach that is how could I afford it? And it's a really simple little twist. And one is scarcity driven, one is abundant driven. I've got a buddy who through the coronavirus has been doing Instacart probably like 12 hours a week. And he's been paying off debt, doing the debt snowball. And he makes $1,000 a week. And his whole it all came from he's like, I laid out my whole budget and it's going to take me like 3.5 years or whatever it was to. I'm like, that's a long time. How can you do it in 2? And he's like, I don't know. How could I make 24,000 more or whatever it might be a year? And so he's like, now he sets his brain off in trying to solve a problem that he wasn't thinking of before. And so it's a really simple little twist. And that was a very specific example, but I think you get the point in that you have to ask yourself a different question. I think asking yourself the right question is really important. And we almost always ask the wrong question when it comes to budgeting and finances.
Or no question at all,
Yeah,
right?
or
So
no
just
question at all.
asking the question. I'd be interested if because I also find that when you ask yourself the right question and the important questions, oftentimes you don't get the answer for yourself right away, or maybe even consciously. For me, it comes to me on a run, in a shower,
Yeah.
when I'm relaxed on a bike ride, something like that. So do you know when he found the inspiration on the Instacart answer?
It what certainly wasn't right away because
Yeah.
we had sat down in kind of a coffee shop setting, and he couldn't. He thought of a bunch of different ones, but not that one. And I think it was when he was. I don't know if he was at Aldi or Target, and he saw someone doing Instacart shopping, and he actually, surprisingly enough, he loves to shop, and so he's like, maybe I could do that. And so but I think you just have to be open to ideas hit you, inspiration hits you just at strange, like just
Yeah.
as you mentioned, at strange times when you're not thinking about it too. So you have to allow for space in your day for those ideas to come up and disrupt your pattern. Go someplace different, take a different route, go to a different place to run or a hike or do whatever it is. But yeah, inspiration often hits at weird times.
Yeah, I definitely find that. Cool story from another coach
Hmm.
of mine named Michael Osterlink. So he's got a story, and I'll make it fairly short as far as his method, but he has a method around this same concept of basically asking yourself these important questions right before you go to sleep at night on a
Mm,
consistent day over day basis for a period of time. And he's had people that he's coached or counseled through that then you're becoming open to finding the answers, right? So he had
yeah.
one guy literally walking past a bookshelf where a magazine or a book slid off, hit him, landed on the floor, opened to a page that
Get
inspired
out.
the answer for himself.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I've not heard something like that. That's pretty incredible. If
Right.
that's not a good sign right there, I don't know what is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, that saying is great about how could I afford that? And I've heard one very, very similar. I don't remember where it came from. It might be from The Millionaire Next Door, if you've ever read
Mm,
that study in that
yeah,
book.
Stanley.
And it becomes more of the question, not of, and I try to remember to have this conversation with my son when he wants to go get things, the new skateboard,
Mm-hmm.
the bike or whatever. It's not, you can't afford that, or I can't afford that. It's what do we choose to afford?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good one
Right.
too.
I mean,
Yep.
scarcity, we all make trade-off decisions with our
Yeah.
time, with our money, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah. I think your son is he 11, 12? He's
He's 12
younger.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good to teach. Yeah. That's awesome.
What about, I know, so you and I have a few things in common. I'm going to guess you're a relatively tall guy since you played basketball. I'm 6'4", 6'5". Unfortunately, I also had the experience of several disc injuries and sciatic nerve
That
impingement
was it.
and
That's what I had.
surgery
Yep.
right around when I was 30 or so. But another thing we have in common is I love talking about and using for myself BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals.
Yeah.
Where does that fit into your process?
I tell you, that was our big why as we were going through like 38 months. Paying off debt was a slog. I don't even know if that's a word, but it was a slog. I
It is
mean,
now.
it was tough. And for us to stay with it, you have to have a BHAG that pulls you into the future when you don't feel like getting there yourself. And for us, it looked a lot like what we want our lifestyle to look like. Our son was born through some of that, actually during that debt payoff process. So then it became, what kind of world do we want to have our son in, and legacy do we want to have for our son and hopefully his kids? And it became so much more and so much well beyond who we were and what we were doing, that it just really pulled us into that future. And I think BHAG, I don't know if I got this right, but I think BHAG came from Jim Collins, right? It was his book,
That's right.
Good to
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Yeah. And I just think that helps you get through tough times, and it gets you through adversity. And when you go through a process or anything that long of a time, you're going to hit adversity. And so you're going to be challenged by it. And so there's got to be a BHAG in that. So for us, it's lifestyle driven. And then in the business that I have too, there's a giving component that I'm working towards as well. That is so much greater than just the guys that I serve and the things that we do. It's about impact and a legacy there too. So it plays into everything that I do.
That's amazing. Do you find that I mean, life, the journey, it's inherently endless, right? It's a lifetime of journey, and it's uncertain, right? That's part of the
Yeah.
fun of it. So I know you're still creating your vision,
Yeah.
but have you found, as you set those types of big, audacious goals, things that maybe at one point seem impossible, you end up reaching them, and then
Yeah.
you reset to a new vision beyond anything you could have imagined?
Yeah, you cast another vision. Yes, I mean, you mentioned before, I did one Ironman in 2018, and it's amazing because I trained for a while to get to it, and then you cross the finish line, and then you probably experienced this too. You're like, well, and now what? You know what I mean? The actual enjoyment comes from the journey. It truly does, and it's so cliche to say, but that finish line happens like that, and you have to look back and say, wow, look at how far I've come. Look at what I'm capable of doing now. What can I do? I didn't think I could do this a year ago, and now I did it. And so you can imagine what a few more years you could do, or a decade you can do. So yeah, I love the journey, and it builds so much character, and that's truly where all the joy is.
It is. Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons I love sports and those kind of challenges, I mean, one thing, it really, if you push yourself, it puts you outside of your comfort zone. There's a lot of growth opportunity in that.
Mm.
Another is it's an amazing metaphor for life, just as you just described. And within that, you go out and do something like an Ironman, or my longest endeavor so far was a 31-mile obstacle course race up and down Squaw
Mm.
Valley at Tahoe
Mm.
this past September, my first one of that distance. But rain, snow, all the elements and the altitude and all that good stuff. And you can't, at least I find, I think sports psychology bears this out, and just mindset coaching is, it's very hard to go off the start line and think 31 miles ahead, or,
Yeah.
12 hours of racing ahead. You really have
Yep.
to break it down into micro goals, like you do any, big, crazy goal. And so in a way, you cross that finish line before you know it, because that was
Yeah.
really never your focus. It was the next hill, the next obstacle, the
The
next
next
mile,
step. I
and then you're
mean,
there.
literally the next
The
step.
next step.
It really was. And I don't know what that 31-mile journey looked like, but the marathon portion at the end of the Ironman was just simply like 6 miles out and then back and then out and back. Like, okay, well, I can do 6 miles, but then it's like, well, there's an aid station every mile. I can run a mile. And so you start to, it's beautifully said, you start to break down those big goals into small goals, and it becomes so much more manageable.
The other piece of it that works for me is when I'm out there doing a race, I try to keep some sort of intrinsic and extrinsic goal or why or driver to me,
Mm-hmm.
or said more simply, what's my accountability for finishing?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not bragging rights. I'm not out there to podium yet. It's for me, it's about it is about the journey, but every time I'm out there doing it, my wife and my son are at the finish line. So it's about
Mm-hmm.
crossing that finish line and seeing them, and
Yeah.
getting that hug from my son when he sort of
Oh yeah. Little
jumps under
sign,
the
a li-
corral where he's not supposed to be, and
a little
things like
sign that,
that. So I think of it as accountability,
yeah.
and I think that's
Yeah.
a process you use in the group of guys you work with as well.
Yeah. I mean, you look at it this way, especially as it relates to personal finances. And most people don't look at it this way, but like, if you want to go, you want to lose some weight, get into good shape, you'd hire a personal trainer, perhaps, if you're going to the gym. And the reason why that works so well is it's the accountability, because that you got to show up next week and you're supposed to be eating these foods at these times and you're supposed to log them. And if you don't, and you come back next week, like, it'll show, they'll know. And so I think that accountability just really forces you to step up a little bit. And that's what's so important, just in the group that I take through personal finances, is there's got to be a level of accountability. There's got to be a level of, hey, you said you were going to do this. Did you do it? Because if no one's doing that for you, there's a greater chance it's not going to get done. So I think accountability is everything. So it's kind of like I'm a I'm someone that is really stepping in with your finances, same way that you would hire a personal trainer. So I'm kind of a personal trainer for your finances for some of the work that I do.
I like that. I like that. And how does that, so if we switch gears a little bit, how does that intersect with or overlap with what you do through the reaching beyond experience? And that's where I saw your concept of the work life rhythm.
Yeah.
And definitely want to talk about that a little bit, because I always heard
Yeah.
work hard, play hard when I was, in a big up or out organization. But is your reaching beyond experience, is there an overlap there between those guys and the guys that you're also helping free up from the financial side of things to enable that other journey?
Yeah, yes and no. So the personal finance, or the kind of the money momentum course that I have, really is to help people get finances under control. It's to kind of have a plan, to feel good about, here's what I have with my finances. A lot of times, some of those individuals that are in there have quite a bit of debt, and they're looking to get out of it and unwind it. So to go to that person and say, hey, I've got this experience in North Carolina for a couple of days, and here's the investment. They're going to be like, what? So it's someone, they're probably the different person. And what I really teach is work. So to get into that, I teach work-life rhythm, different than balance. I think that work-life balance, when you say that to someone, a lot of times they kind of laugh, because they're like, well, I mean, maybe you get it, but can you sustain it? It's really hard to sustain. Um, and my experience has been, my work is seasonal. There's periods of intense focus work, and then I should be resting, recharging, recovering. No different than how we treat our body when we go through a race or a workout, right? We train it, and then we're supposed to be eating well, stretching, resting, sleeping. It's kind of the same concept, but for how we treat our physical, our mental, our emotional, spiritual, all of those things, all said and done. So the best way I kind of share that is, I'm a golfer. I like to golf. I don't know if you golf, but there's there's the long game and the short game. The long game is your drive when you hit it. So I can hit it far, not always straight, but I can hit it far. And then as I get closer to the green, that's the short game. It's the chipping and the putting. I'm really bad at that. So if you can put together the long game and the short game, you're going to have a good golf game. So I look at maintaining professional performance, elite performance, as though mastering working hard and resting and recovering. And most people don't really do a good job of resting and recovering. They work really hard, they put their head down, they go to Cancun for a week and they overindulge on food and drink. And then they come back and they say, man, I need a vacation from that vacation. So I teach there's big strategies to do, but then there's things that you can do inside each and every day that'll also help you rest and recharge. So I really just try to teach that concept.
Do you, I'm glad you mentioned sort of a daily routine. Do you have, I like to focus a lot on starting my day the best way I can,
Mm-hmm.
ending my day the best way I can to prime my next day and kind of bookend it. Do you have a morning routine, evening routine you like and that you recommend?
Yeah. So the evening routine, it's because I think it starts the night before. So it's
Right.
kind of before you go to bed. My wife, we do celery juice in the morning. So we'll actually go through, cut, clean, wash the celery, and do all that. We'll get kind of the coffee kind of set up. We'll go through together and say, okay, what are the two big things you have to do tomorrow that would make tomorrow a huge success for you, and how do I help? Just so that we're both kind of mentally preparing for what's going to happen that next day. And we just do a few small things that help the morning easier, like reduce that friction in the morning where you're waking up and you really want to hit the snooze or you're running late. So we do a couple things at night to set up the next day, but then the morning, it usually depends on the season. So right now, I think just a couple days ago was the longest day of the year. So it's light out early and it's um, light out really late. So we get up earlier when it's seasonally appropriate like this. We kind of just try to wake up more with the sun. And um, we usually, my wife will go run, she'll go do her workout. If our son sleeps, then he sleeps in. That's kind of what's dictating this. But I usually will come downstairs and I'll get a little bit of work done. Sometimes I'll take the dog out. I got to try and so there's a couple of themes to it: get my body moving, get my head on right, and then get some good food to get my body kind of started. So those are the three pillars. Depending on the season, it all looks kind of different. But right now, we have an earlier morning than we might say in January.
Oh, very cool. And I like the partnership conversation, especially in the evening. So I picked that up. I mean, it seems obvious, but I picked up something very similar from somebody else recently, and it was just that the importance of kind of communicating
Yeah.
and listening and aligning, and it doesn't take much time.
And well, especially because as we're recording this, we're kind of coming out of, we're still in the shelter and stuff. And so when you've got a little one who's at home because there's no school, and both mom and dad are working from home, you have got to be communicating on what's going on every single day, because someone's got to watch the kid and two people have to work, and there's a lot going on. So I can't imagine not getting on the same page real quick. I think it's just critical, especially right now.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts. So it really resonates what you're saying about recharging and maybe recharging the right way in those bigger
Mm,
moments of
yeah.
rehabilitation. I what was it, last summer? Gosh, it seems like forever ago now with this COVID thing. But
Hmm.
about this time last year, my son and I went for 5 days to the Mount Whitney area, camped and hiked up the
Cool.
mountain and hung out with another group of dads and sons, boys. And the boys had a blast playing in nature. It was almost a little bit of a rite of passage for my son because it was the first time he'd been away from mama for 5 days, hardly
Yeah.
any cell coverage. So could barely even,
Yeah.
call and say hi. But there's just something about unplugging like that, doing things that are a little more primal, literally
Mm,
getting back to being grounded in
yeah.
nature. And
Yeah.
man, that's probably the best break I've had in a long time.
What's interesting is in some of the experiences, I forced solitude on the group. And some of those guys are like, what do I do with myself? You know what I mean? Like we're not used to not having our phone and being on it like when there's 2 seconds when you're standing in line at Target. You know what I mean? So trying to give people 60 minutes, 90 minutes, or 2 hours of solitude, no phone, just a pen and paper and write. A lot of people don't know what to do with that. So, but there is something really powerful about being still, being quiet, and recharging that way as well. I think that's I think it's a primal instincts. It's great to be out in nature and do those things. I think that's so important, and you'll be surprised the things that come up, and you've got to kind of work through and go through. But then maybe new ideas that come up too that have been trying to surface, but you just haven't allowed them to happen. So I think it's solitude is great. That's a big part of my strategy.
Nice. Yeah, I think Bill Gates talks about that. He goes in solitude for, I think it's like 5 days or a week each year, and he just goes off and he reads
Wow.
and he I think journals.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of his thought process has happened. So a couple things that we were on the move, hiking, trying to, with a goal, get up the mountain, get down the mountain
Hmm.
type of thing. Having the kids make meals, clean up meals. So there were things that were structured activities or goal oriented, but one of the coolest things for the kids was just freedom, go out and be boys and
Yeah.
throw rocks and make up games and run around and fall
Yep.
down and get hurt and have fun. Right. Uh, for the adults, everybody had to find their own way of being. And so something I spent some time doing, I'll throw it at you since you got a 3-year-old with Cal, and congratulations, by the way.
Hmm. Thank
So
you.
when our son was born, my wife gave me a journal sitting here on my desk. And the idea was just a place for me to write to my son.
Mm.
So I've got 2 journals. I've got my journal, but then I've got this journal that I write in as my son has been growing over the years. So at one point while we were up there, I was sitting at a picnic table, and he goes, "What are you writing?" And I said, "Well, you've never seen this before." But I told him that story, and I said, you can read this whenever you want, but you'll read this someday, and
Yeah.
hopefully it'll spark some memories, and maybe there'll be some nuggets of wisdom in there.
I love it. I do once a year on his birthday. I just write out, and I need to do more because it's really kind of hard to remember some of the things
It
that
is.
happen. But I write and I do a short little video. And then I've been storing, he's only 3, but I've
Right.
stored, I bought a bottle of vintage champagne for each year, and I want to keep doing, so hopefully he likes champagne. But that's a great way. I should do that more often. I don't know why I do, but I love the whole point is just to be intentional.
Right.
And I totally agree. That's good. I like that.
Yeah, and it is tough. It's tough to remember, but it's also a lot of times it's just like the fun, silly little things that seem
Yeah.
meaningless, but they make for great memories.
Yeah.
Another thing that we did, I don't know how much this was by design, but it's worked out really cool. We bought a potted fig tree around the time he was born, and then when we moved to the house that we were in, he kind of, he's tiny. We got pictures of him sort of
Hmm.
helping me plant it. The
Hmm.
thing's massive now. He's 12 years old, and
That's
he
cool.
knows that it's grown along with him, and we can go and get fruit off of it each year and see the
Man, that's
seasonality
cool.
to that as it grows and he grows. So that's been
Yeah.
cool as well.
Yeah, like I don't know if we could keep a plant alive that long in our household at least, but I like the idea.
Surprisingly, we planted it in the backyard, and surprisingly, it is probably the healthiest tree we've got or
Wow,
plant. So we're not
that's
great
cool.
at keeping them alive, but that one has been thriving. So maybe there's
Cool.
some greater meaning there.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
before we wrap, I want to respect your time, Kyle. You got a lot of interesting stuff going on. Just can you say a little bit more about what you're doing and the work with the Reaching Beyond experience for? We talked a lot about the sort of debt sovereignty piece.
mm, mhm,
I know you described it a little bit differently, but for guys who really are now in that mode of looking for cool experiences, maybe a tribe of similar guys and
yeah,
mindset, and also looking for some guidance and inspiration around that sort of version 2.0 of the rest of their life.
yeah,
What's that about?
yeah. So I try to be really intentional with creating experiences for guys to step into for work-life rhythm, to allow things like this to happen. Because I think a lot of times as guys, we're really good at putting our head down and working really, really hard, but we're not quite as good as cultivating a community and cultivating tribe and like-minded men that are, they've had some success, they've had some achievements, and maybe they're thinking of 2.0s. And so I've got one coming up in October. It's kind of centered around golf because the average round of golf is 4 to 4.5 hours. So if I can do a good job of putting the right people into that group, I know just from past experiences that when the guys are together, amazing things come up. And I've got a corporate sponsor who, oddly enough, has taken historic pocket watches and he turns them into wristwatches. And his whole idea for the business came on a golf course. And a handful of his investors have come from golf. And so I'm like, there's a theme here with golf. And I think it's really powerful when you get the right people together. You just kind of mastermind organically in a really fun way. So that's kind of the whole theme of it. I kind of really, it all seems really fluid and seamless and works together, but there's a tremendous amount of intentionality that goes behind, hand selecting people and curating the experiences. We got golf. There's a NASCAR experience component where we actually get to pit a NASCAR in North Carolina as well as a part of this. So there'll be a competitive piece to it as well, because I know guys like that stuff. I do too. So the whole point is just getting kind of guys together, have a theme of doing something fun, something outdoors, and just having guys connect with guys and go through life together. So I do that through golf. I did it through a dog sledding experience in March of this past year, right before everyone kind of got locked down. We just snuck that one in there. I'll probably anniversary that one again next year, because that was just a ton of fun. So those are some of the things that I'm doing. And probably the best way is just to go to my website and check that out.
Yeah, those experiences sound like a blast, especially the dog sledding. It's so unique. Not that we're pitting in NASCAR every day, but where do you go find a dog sled experience, right? I wouldn't even know where to start. And it does seem to really nicely follow your, I feel like you've really got an energy and a philosophy around seasonality, the seasons of life and the seasons of the year. Yeah. So I know you have sort of a warm weather, cold weather rhythm to what you do.
Yeah, and we cold plunge when we go dog sledding. So
nice.
If people have always wanted to cold plunge, it's a ton of fun. It's exhilarating. And then we jump into a sauna because we're all kind of babies, but it's a lot of fun. But we'll do that one again.
Was that an in and out plunge, or did you sit and enjoy? Yeah.
I think I got up to like 2 minutes is kind of what I sat in there for, and then I cried uncle, I think. But that's not. I don't know. I was kind of impressed. I'd never done it before, so I thought that was all right.
Yeah, no, that's an amazing experience. So for guys who may be interested, just let us know where to find you on social media and your website. Of course, we'll get links to all this up, but give us a quick rundown on where to find Kyle.
Yeah, and again, it's Depiesse. People will look at it and they will not be able to say that. So I give a lot of grace with that. But I'm most active, I'd say, on Instagram, which is just Kyle_Depiesse, and then the website is also Kyle Depiesse. Those are probably the best ways. I think I'm most active on Instagram. I love to communicate and connect with others, especially if I can add value to someone. I am just overly excited to do that, because I think that's how we can all move forward together.
Perfect. Love it. Your podcast, I'm assuming, is on all major platforms. And then for anybody who's interested in more of the money momentum side of things, I believe that's called 99 Money Momentum.
Yep, that's correct. Yep.
All right, perfect. Well, Kyle, Mr. D, Depiesse, really appreciate the time and the insight. I guess last question on the Reaching Beyond experience. So how big is that community? Is this a process where guys would need to reach out and sort of apply, or what does the process look like?
Yeah, so it'll be about 16 people, which is a good group to manage highly curated experiences for. And I like to do that through an application process. So on the website, you click on the link and you take a look at the very bottom is an application. And I kind of just want to connect. And I kind of just want to hear about the person and what they're looking for, just to make sure it's the right fit. Just in doing some of these groups in the past, part of the magic is just having the right people in it, and making sure that people are coming in with an other-centered focus, not like, okay, how can I just make these sleazy connections to forward something in my life? And it's all, so I want to spend time with someone just to make sure that I'm a right fit for them, and they're a right fit for the group as well. So 16 people is usually where I kind of max some of these out. The dog sledding is less than that, but the golf one's 16. That's a lot of dogs otherwise.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, congratulations again, Kyle, on your son and your family that you're creating, and this journey and your experience for yourself and for like-minded men that you're creating. It's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. I've enjoyed jumping on here and chatting. And so thank you for having me on and sharing your platform and your community with me.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Great meeting you, Kyle.
You too.
All right, guys, that's it for this week with guest Kyle Depiesse. Make sure you go check him out and the Reaching Beyond experience. You can find links to his Facebook, Instagram, his videos, his LinkedIn, even his website at the show notes for this one, which are on manofmastery.com/059. manofmastery.com/059. All right, thanks again to Kyle. Great things going on with his work-life rhythm. Go check out the Reaching Beyond experience. And that's it for this week, guys. We'll see you next week.